move and second the apologies. Oh no, we've done it. You moved it and Andrew seconded
Yeah.
it.
So, that's... Okay, so now we move, we're just going to deal with an item that Glenn Livingston has an interest in, the Capital Endowment Fund application, so we can deal with that before he leaves. Item 19. So, Tony, could I invite you to give a brief overview? Thank you.
So today this report really asks two key questions of the City Council. Is it better? Which is, should we partner with a Healthy Homes Canterbury service, which I'll talk about what that service is in a moment. And obviously, if we partner in that service, we can then provide whole of home advice. If we do not, then it will be a sales-focused advice that the residents will receive as part of that service. And then the second question is, of course, how much would we contribute to that service should you choose to? And there's three options discussed in the report. What I'd like to do just now is take a moment to talk about the difference between whole of home advice and sales-focused advice, because it's hard to explain that in the report. So I thought if I just give you a sense of what's involved, then you understand what we're talking about and investing in potentially. So for the residents, it takes about 1 hour. An assessor comes to your home. Sales-focused advice first, to be fun. Sales-focused advice focuses on the features, the benefits, the product. So a heat pump salesperson, for example, will talk about how quiet the heat pump is, the cost of the heat pump, of course, the size you need for your home, the benefits of having a heat pump, they're efficient. They'll talk about the location of that heat pump and talk about the after-sales service for the heat pump. So it's going to describe the benefits of their products and the features that that product has, and then you will be able to access a loan from the regional council to help fund that appliance, but their advice and their focus will be on selling that appliance to the homeowner, which is totally fine, and if you need a heat pump or insulation, fantastic. But we're talking about a different form of advice, which is based on the Build Back Smarter service that the City Council is currently running, which will end when this new service starts. And for the last, since the earthquakes, really 2013, we started this service. We've helped about 5,500 homes make their homes warmer, dry and healthier by giving them whole of home advice. It's free advice from an expert, a trained professional. They are qualified in a home performance assessment. That's a course they run. It's a 3-day course, and they also sign an agreement as to how they'll behave. So there's a high level of quality associated with their advice they provide. It's no obligation advice. It's in-home advice. So the person comes to your home and walks around the home with you, looks at all the different aspects of your home and gives you that advice. And then they also write a healthy home improvement plan. So it's a written list of things that you can do to improve the home, and it's a prioritised list that talks about the benefits and the costs of making those interventions. And it's specific to the person and to their home. So it's less about the products and more about the dwelling and the person. That's how Build Back Smarter has run, and this report proposes to continue that type of advice, but to link it to some other financial support that's available. So the advice that we provide through Build Back Smarter covers all of these different aspects, and I just want to take a moment to give you a sense of the sorts of advice that they provide. It's $150 to provide this advice. The assessor is in your home for about an hour, and then another hour to write up the advice and give you those recommendations. So it's 2 hours worth of work from an advisor. So firstly, they assess the home, then they give you that verbal advice, and then they write you a written report on all of those aspects. So let me give you some examples of the sorts of things they talk about. They'll talk about draft stopping. And draft stopping is the most important cost-effective way to stop heat loss, and for many homes in Christchurch, the drafts around the windows and doors amounts to about this size of hole in your wall. So it's basically the wind literally blowing straight through your doors and your windows, making your home cooler. Likewise, because our windows are so poor, talking about full-length double layers of curtains, you can increase the room temperature by 2 degrees without adding any heat at all, just by having improvements to your curtains. So they'll talk about how you can do that and the best ways to fit those curtains to your home. They'll talk about the sources of moisture in your home and where you get the moisture from. And because Christchurch largely is built on a swamp, we also get a huge amount of moisture from the ground, which is about 45 litres a day coming into your home. So they'll talk about where the moisture sources come from and then where that moisture goes, because in the home that goes to wherever it's coldest. So cold places, that moisture will condense, like we said on our windows, but it also condenses inside the walls, the floor, and even in cupboards and in clothing that's in the cupboards. So thinking about where that moisture goes, and then they'll give advice on how to avoid that moisture in the home. The importance of opening windows, the importance of having a plastic vapour sheet on the ground, a plastic layer on the ground to stop the moisture rising out of the soil, and the importance of having ventilation in the kitchen and bathroom to get that moisture out of the home, and obviously not drying your clothes inside, and having unflued gas heaters which produce carbon monoxide as well as moisture for the home. They'll cover all those aspects. They'll also talk about the importance of insulation and minding the gap. Brands have done research that shows that even a 4mm gap, which is tiny, reduces the thermal performance of your insulation by 15%. So they'll look at the condition of your insulation and give you advice around that, both the fit and the depth. Importantly, they'll look at the downlights that many homes have and see if they are actually drawing heat out of the room, because the way that downlights work is they heat up, and because they heat up they act like a chimney and they actually physically suck heat out of the room. But also because they heat up, the insulation needs to be set back from the lights, so you have a gap, a space around the lights. So you're breaking really the thermal performance of that insulation in your home. So they'll give advice around changing those to LED and IC rated lights, which then can be covered with insulation, that you won't have that heat loss from your lounge. The importance of LEDs, you can save $25 a light bulb if you change to LEDs, for example. Wrapping hot water cylinders, again, $80, pays for itself in 1 year. So the importance of just keeping heat in your home and making sure you're just heating the water rather than heating the space around the cylinder. In this case, $80 a year saved. And even just switching off at the wall, turning off appliances at the wall can save $100 a year. And if you're having difficulty reaching around the back of your TV to turn off the switches, you can also have remote controlled switches that actually allow you to switch off the lights remotely. So that's a quick sample of some of the things they'll talk about in your home. And then this is an example of a piece of a healthy home improvement plan. And it lists the actions that are recommended, the benefits of taking those actions, it prioritises them for your home, and then it gives you an indication as to the cost for each of those things for your home. So the person after the assessment has a high level of understanding about what they need to do for their home, about the benefits of making those changes, and then understanding the costs. So, Healthier Homes Canterbury. It's a funding service. It's available to all ratepayers in the region-wide, up to a maximum of $6,000. Homeowners, ratepayers, can access a loan from the Environment Canterbury, the Regional Council. It takes a 9-year payback with a fixed interest rate, and it's only one home loan per person, one loan per ratepayer, sorry. So if you're a landlord with multiple properties, you're just allowed one loan. But equally, that one loan has to apply to all of those things you might want to change. So it applies to ceiling, heating appliance, kitchen and bathroom fan, moisture barrier, and draft stopping. Now this is the first time that we've ever had financial support for draft stopping and a moisture barrier and a fan in the home. So this is a unique opportunity for our residents to access this type of funding. Through Build Back Smarter, we managed to achieve 75% of the homes that received the advice took up that advice. They made changes to their homes. And the main reason why they didn't was because of the financial constraints. So this links an advice service to a funding service. But there are other sources of funding as well, not just from the Regional Council. There is also funding available from ECA, that's the government. They're now offering a 75% subsidy for insulation. trading banks, ANZ, have also offered a zero interest loan for insulation, and we're encouraging other trading banks to do the same. And then there's the curtain bank, of course, from Community Energy Action, where people can access curtains, and then other product discounts. So there's a suite of funding available for people to access. But the key point is, in order for people to access, they need the confidence to be able to access those funds. So the sound advice and the financial support can deliver the highest level of uptake. So that's a quick run through really on the background to this and why we're bringing this to you today. And I'm happy to explore questions you may have, but I understand there's some questions around some finances and details, which I'm happy to reflect on now if that's appropriate.
Yes, that's fine.
So if I could ask you to turn in your reports to the first table, which is table 1. I'll just walk through the table with you.
What page is it on, Tony?
Well,
Oh,
It's on page 174.
right.
Does that get you to something that looks like
Yes, it does.
table 1 in the middle-ish of the page?
Yep.
so just what I'd like to do is just walk through the table with you so you understand the sort of breakdown of the costs and where they arise. So in this particular table, we're talking about 1,000 homes per year receiving advice at $150 per home. Now, that's the total of 150,000, of course. We're estimating that the next line down, about 300 people will take up the home loan, about 300. But if they take up the home loan, you can fold into that loan the $150 cost. Or if the provider is selling a heat pump, they may choose to waive that because the heat pump is a large item, and they could probably get a discount from the provider because they're dealing with a service at scale. So maybe one of the suppliers would offer that as an incentive. So what we've done there is we've assumed that all 300 will either roll the $150 into a loan or be waived by the provider, which then amounts to $45,000. And then that leaves $100,000, $105,000 remaining. And then we have in our long-term plan allocated $20,000 per year, and that's indicated there. And the next line down is a $50,000 one-off carry forward. So this financial year alone, there's a $50,000 carry forward. The next line is because there's a gap between the financial year in June and before the service starts in September, we are still continuing with the Build Back Smarter service, and so the advice is still being given to the residents, and so the cost of paying for that advice that's happening between the two services is $20,000. And so then the bottom line is, topping that up, the Capital Endowment Fund requests along the bottom line 55, 85 and 85 per year, and that then means that the total council contribution per year is listed along the bottom. So that's where those costs, and that's kind of the same for each of the tables and each of the options. All right, hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, that's actually incredibly helpful, and so was your presentation, because I guess what you're saying is that with all of these different financial support options available to people, if they were to get the right advice at the beginning, they'd make some better choices about how they might access those.
Correct.
Yeah.
If I could just add one point, during the Build Back Smarter service provision, we surveyed every year to kind of understand how the service was being received, and one of the comments that we received, which I think I'm going to remember correctly, but Tony will correct me if I haven't, is that people appreciated that the advice was coming from an independent source, and that was something that we heard consistently through the years that the program ran, and so that's another thing that another offer that this provides if the advice service was supported.
Yeah. Sarah.
Thank you. This does look really, really good, and I know Build Back Smarter has been really successful. Two quick questions. Why would someone choose to roll the $150 into the loan when we've already offered to pay it?
So with this particular proposal, we're talking about 1,000 homes receiving the advice.
Yeah.
And so that is made up of the council support and also the loan, the rolling of that money into the loan. So it's a combination of both. So if you choose not to take up the regional council's loan, which we think many people won't,
Yeah.
they'll be self-funding the improvements themselves. They'll be putting in the draft stopping or the insulation or whatever it might be on their own.
Yeah. But I thought that $150 was the cost of the advice.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct.
So if we've offered to pay for the cost of the advice, why would a resident then choose to not accept the $150 and to add that to their loan, if you like?
Yeah. So at the moment, the way the service is structured, it's if you take up the loan with the regional council, you
must. So it's not a choice.
it'll
That's
fold in.
how it works.
Yeah.
That's just a default setting of how it works.
Yes.
Okay.
And that allows
That's
us
cool.
to provide advice to more homes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is great.
That makes sense.
That's really good.
Yeah.
The other thing is
I
on
can understand
so 4.9, councillors on page 168. It looks at the level of funding and different options. It says, note all options include a review of the service after 3 years in preparation for a funding proposal to the long-term plan, which is great. What sort of data is being collected? It'd be really good to know how many, not just how many people, but actually what advice they have taken up, not just the number of loans and things, but to have really good data from the outset on actually the types of improvements, the impacts of those, that kind of thing, because it would be really good data to have for a long-term plan bid.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
We can add potentially a clause relating to that into the agreement.
That would be really good.
Anne and then Yanni. Jimmy.
Thanks, Tony, for a very clear explanation of the scheme. It's fantastic. I've sat in a house where the wind has been coming through the windows, and it was in a house where a person was English as a second language. So in terms of when the advisor goes into a home to help that person, is that advice, do they stay with the person so that they can explain and talk and take them through? So I think that would be really important.
Yes.
Is that what's done? Yeah. So
the advisor comes to the home, and in the example you've given of someone who doesn't speak English well, or it might be that there's an elderly person in the home, we do encourage a second person to be in the home to support that person, but the advisor is trained to be careful about how they treat a person, and also even just walking around the home, they don't enter a room where the owner's not there, for example. So they're careful the way they manage the assessments. But yes, the assessor stays in the home for that hour, giving them the advice around all the different aspects of improving the home, and then they receive later a written report about the home and the recommendations.
further to that, so if the person didn't have access to the internet, for example, and in terms of applying for the funding and all those sorts of things, that would be also support was given through that? So
quite often people can just phone in and ask for the service to be delivered to them. Because we haven't got a lot of money to spend on marketing, nearly all of the Build Back Smarter uptake has been from word of mouth. So people have taken up the service, and then they're telling their friends and family members to use the service. So you can obviously register online, and you can ring up by phone. Those are the two main ways to connect.
Can you choose to pay for it yourself?
The assessment?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
You could, and I'm sure that we haven't set that up in the structure here, but yes, you could.
Yeah. Because I mean, it seems to me that if there were some good publicity for this, and maybe even today's the beginning of that, someone like myself, I could afford to pay, so I'm going to ring up and say I'd like to get this service, but yeah. That sounds like a great idea. I mean, some of the stuff I know because I know it. Other stuff, I only picked up about drying inside, which I do all the time. When I went to the Eka home opening, the insulation opening that they did just recently, and it just never occurred to me, because you don't see it happening, that it's so damaging. So now, it's easy just to open a window, but never occurred to me it was such a big issue. Yanni?
Yeah, my understanding, I just want to pick up something that you said, that previously the service was just independent advice. My understanding from previously, because of lack of funding, there were companies that were providing the advice that were also selling the products. Is that correct?
So the way the service is delivered, sorry, I missed that. In Christchurch, we have 3 service providers who give that advice, and one of them is Community Energy Action, another Aircon New Zealand Limited, and then Smart Energy. Energy Smart, I beg your pardon, Energy Smart, who's associated with Te Rālana. So those 3 companies have sent their staff to be independently trained through the Community Energy Network, and then those are now official home performance advisors, and that they've signed some protocols around how they deliver that advice, and those 3 companies then have those staff going to homes giving that advice. So it does sound like a heat pump or an insulation company is coming to your home giving you information around their products, but actually the way the advice is being delivered, it covers all of those aspects I described in a very brand neutral way, and then the homeowner is left with the decision, what would they like to do. It's entirely up to the homeowner. No obligation advice is what we're providing. And then the homeowner then is informed about the different financial supports that are available, and then they can make their choice.
But they don't know that the person's represented in their day job.
They will know.
They will know that.
Yes, it's on their name badge.
But that's not a product that they're left details about?
Correct. So the service we are paying for, built through Build Back Smarter, is an advice service from that company.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in terms of any evaluation, have we looked at how many people have been assessed and then what the uptake is in terms of products from which companies?
So in terms of the uptake, we do a customer survey, as Carolyn mentioned before, and the customer survey results were that 90% were satisfied, that 75% of the homeowners that received the advice actually took action in their home, but we didn't go to the detail of, I've got what's recommended to their homeowner, but I haven't got the specifics around what they take up in terms of the purchases they make. Yeah. So that information I don't have, because we're just providing the advice service.
No, I understand that, but just in terms of transparency, if you've got, and I understand why you've done it the way you've done it, but I do think in terms of transparency, that is actually quite important.
Sarah's already raised this as a mechanism for collecting very rich data, and obviously what people take up, linking it to the actual advice that they receive, who they receive it from is going to be a significant part of that.
Correct.
Yeah. Jimmy, then Tim.
Thank you. Two questions. First one is on the page 170 in here, particular 5.10, the bullet point 1 and the 2. I just want to know what's the rationale. You pick up the 22%, 30,000 homes, rather than the 51,000 homes, 32%. Because I reviewed the 5.13, you particularly emphasize fully insulated and damp home is much harder and costly to heat. So why you pick up the 22%, only those 30,000 homes, rather than 51,000 homes.
I understand. That's correct. So I was just giving you, so that the piece of the report you're referring to lists a whole lot of different challenges that we're facing as a country in Christchurch. Yes. And I just, in the other parts of the report, just referred to the one which is around insulation. But you are right. Moisture and dampness in the homes is a very significant issue for Christchurch, which is listed here. Brands have done research just recently that's come out with assessment for the whole of New Zealand, saying that half of the homes in New Zealand have visible mould in them. Half. So we really have a big problem with our moisture in New Zealand, and this is an indication here. So I didn't want to, in the analysis, I wasn't really digging into all of the different aspects that we could address, but we are going to be addressing all of those aspects of insulation, ventilation, moisture management when we provide this advice.
But if this household, they have request, also would like to, get a advice or service, how can we do? If those one outside of these 30,000 homes.
So the advice service we could provide through this is looking only at 1,000 homes a year. So we do have guides that talk about the ways to warm up your house as well, and we'll revise these with the new branding of the new service. There is also ECA with their Energy Spot advertising on television that talk about the different ways to care for your home. And then there's tools that ECA have on the website too about understanding the different aspects of your home, and there's little videos online that help. So there are, and we are also working through the health boards, so talking about the medical centres and Plunkett and those sorts of groups, getting this information out there so that people understand the ways to make their homes healthier and more energy efficient.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Nick. The second question is the page 168. Regarding to the option 1, the figure you emphasized, the overall 3 years is $335,000.
Yes.
Where this figure come from?
Oh, okay. So that would
Because if I accumulate, looks like just $295,000. So I'm not sure how to calculate this one.
So the best way to look at the figures is in those tables, and there's 3 tables, one for each option.
Yes.
And that details the where those amounts add up to. And what I've just done on the piece of the report you're looking at is just summarise those for each option. So the 335 is a summary of the table that gives you more details about where the funding and all the money comes from.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Tim?
Thank you. Have we looked at including this in our own social housing, etc.?
So I understand that the City Council is embarking on obviously a repair and rebuild process, and that does include effectively a high standard of living for the dwellings.
Because we also have the housing trust, etc. So
yes,
we have a massive amount of properties. And
yes, so community energy action is being used to insulate those homes as part of that. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so that program is underway, but also in addition they've also included LifeMark standards in there too, so that the dwellings are not just healthy in terms of energy, but they're also good to use in terms of the life stages of people.
It'd be good to know those numbers. So I was at a Meet Your Councillor session at Riccarton Mall the other day, and there was a social housing tenant who obviously hasn't been included in that at this stage, but I guess it's obviously going to take time to get through them all, but that should be a priority for those people who are actually those areas in most in need, and it's our own. It seems ridiculous in some respects. I realise that, but it seems a bit slow.
Okay. Anyone else? Pauline?
Add to Sarah's request about the data, that it is about well-being, but it's also these initiatives are about reducing the cost on our health system at the end of the day. So do we have any way to access, without breaching any privacy acts, but if people are actually finding after a while that they're going to the doctor less often and things like that?
Yes, so there was some work that, well, I'm not sure of the year, sorry, but it was a few years ago. There was some work done with Community Energy Action where they worked with the DHB to invest insulation into homes that where people regularly turned up to the doctors. So they invested $1 million into homes, and in that same year, because of people not turning up to the doctor and not actually needing a night in hospital, they saved $1 million a year as well. So I think it's about $1,000 a night for a person in hospital. So that person only needs to be in hospital 2 nights, and you've paid for the insulation of that home, which is effectively what happened. So if you focus on the most vulnerable in our community, you get the biggest benefit. And that's why in this report it talks about a $1 spend, $6 return benefit. Because if you the elderly, the young, the ill, if they are the ones receiving this this support, that will dramatically reduce the health costs for the country.
So we're still working with the DHB and sharing that data?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Very good. All right. So, Glenn, would you like to move?
Maybe a couple of comments.
Yeah. But
yes,
I want a
move.
resolution on the table.
Yes.
So
Wish to move.
which option are you moving? You're moving the staff recommendations?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Right. Okay. So moved by Glenn, seconded by Vicky. Right. Glenn.
All right. Thank you, and thank you, Mayor, for allowing this to be first on the agenda so I can attend the funeral. Thank you, Tony, also for one of the most compelling presentations I've ever seen. This is a good example of the joined-up process with our regional council. As you know, it was signalled in the LTP for consideration through the rates neutral Capital Endowment Fund. The actual quantum per annum is much less than it used to be under the former Build Back Smarter scheme. And we've heard from Tony how it's configured differently now. We have a really sound reputation as a council for the previous scheme and its unfolding through Build Back Smarter. The press wrote a very complimentary editorial at the time, giving a big tick to the council for rolling this out. You can see through the report and the presentation today that the advice, if this wasn't funded, this advice wouldn't happen. Rather, people would be left with hit and miss advice from those who supply insulation. They wouldn't give that comprehensive overall advice. What flies under the radar, but you see it in the report, is the 128 deaths a year. We know about road deaths. We don't know so much about this, but this is part of the reality. And yet, on the positive side of the equation, the return benefit, as Tony has just said, is 6 to 1. So I always had a hunch that warmer, drier homes would lead to fewer deaths, less illness, greater productivity in the workplace, greater attendance at school. But this actually, provides a figure 6 to 1. I can hardly think of higher cost-benefit ratios. So I urge your support for this. It's a great thing we can do. The actual quantum isn't much. It's less than what I signalled to you in the LTP process, and would be tremendous if you could support it today.
Phil?
Thank you, Leanne. And thank you, I reiterate what Glenn said, staff. I think the work that has been done has been tremendous, and this proposal was an excellent too. Actually, Glenn Livingston usually reminds us about the importance of housing and warmth and shelter in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this fits this program classically to improve what actually clearly is a really serious situation for our city. And with 30,000 homes and critical need in our city, that's a huge number. And so this program will go a long way towards supporting that. And that whole advice part is clearly crucial for people to understand what we've had the good fortune today to be given a good understanding of quite a difficult, challenging problems from different different airflows, if you like, different perspectives. And as Glenn said, the leverage and payback for this is just tremendous in terms of 6 to 1. It's an excellent investment. And I think having something up which actually for private householders to complement requirements of landlords with new legislation, this makes good sense. And I guess the overall thing too, for everybody's health, is it will lead to a reduction of fossil fuels. That's clearly clear in the report, and that's something that we would all want. Clearly at winter time, when electricity use is at its peak, it's at those times that the Huntly coal-burning power stations are brought on, and that's what we will all want to attempt to eliminate. So I certainly support the staff recommendation and what Glenn has said too in supporting that.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried.